Hey guys, tonight we're slipping past velvet drapes and golden gates to visit a world where crowns are inherited. You have to sleep with your cousin to keep the legacy. Destinies are inescapable, and your family tree is more of a tightly wound vine. You're swaddled in the softest silks money can buy, tucked in a gold-cradled nursery under the watchful gaze of painted ancestors, half of whom look eerily like your dad and your mom. A midwife wipes your forehead and pauses. Something's off. Too many toes. One ear folded. You cry, but it sounds wet, labored, strange. Congratulations, you're royal. And you've already lost the genetic lottery. Tonight's bedtime history tale is a slow spiral through the bloodlines of European royalty, where inbreeding wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Power had a price, and sometimes that price was your own ability to walk straight, speak clearly, or live past age 10. And yet, for hundreds of years, they did it anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little kingdom reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie there, squirming on embroidered linen, blissfully unaware that your entire fate has already been sealed by a long list of first cousins playing marital musical chairs. You're the newest branch in a royal dynasty that prizes pure blood. But when the same noble surnames appear on both sides of your family tree, purity starts to look a lot like genetic roulette. A court astrologer whispers that your unusual birthmarks might be divine signs. A nurse mutters a prayer. Meanwhile, your parents beam for a portrait that's already being painted. Royal birth means press coverage, even if your hips are misaligned and your eyelids twitch when you sleep. They'll just paint over that part. The truth is, you were born into a world obsessed with legacy. In medieval and early modern Europe, noble families clung to power by marrying into themselves. The Habsburgs, for example, proudly traced their bloodlines in loops and spirals, convinced that dynastic strength came from never letting outsiders in. You weren't marrying for love. You were marrying your cousin to keep land, titles, and thrones bundled neatly together like a holiday cheese basket. Historians still argue whether this was pure short-sightedness or a calculated trade-off, accepting the risk of hereditary diseases for the reward of a tight power circle. But if you were the child born with weak lungs or a twisted spine, no one asked you. By the time you're old enough to sit up, you're already the subject of palace rumors. Servants gossip in hushed tones about your soft bones or your odd gait. Nobles pretend not to notice your eyes don't quite focus together. But behind chamber doors, decisions are being made. Your lessons will be gentler, your portraits more flattering, and your future marriage already arranged. Likely to another cousin who shares the same delicate constitution. Imagine your nursery. It smells of lavender oil and musty tapestries. A heavy chandelier flickers above. Your toys include carved knights and silk rabbits. But the real legacy is in the books on the shelf. Thick family trees that show how tightly your bloodline has been folded like royal origami. You, little heir, are the product of centuries of matchmaking designed more for politics than biology. One physician insists you're strong as any other royal child. Another raises concerns about your strangely long face and delicate limbs. Historians still debate how much the adults around you actually understood about heredity. They had no concept of recessive genes or DNA, but they didn't notice when the babies kept coming out sick. They just chalked it up to curses, sin, or God's mysterious will. As you grow, you notice you get tired easily. Your tutors lower their expectations. Your siblings, also your cousins, share your fainting spells, your fragile teeth. You try not to feel self-conscious when your knees buckle mid-waltz or when a nosebleed lasts too long. But deep down, you sense that something is not quite right in this royal bloodstream. A strange fact they won't tell you until later. One of your great uncles had 11 fingers. Another died at 3 weeks old, never named. A few others were quietly sent to monasteries, their existence scrubbed from family records. But you're the firstborn son. You're expected to lead armies, sign treaties, produce heirs. Never mind the stutter. Never mind the fact that you need help just climbing a staircase. And while you struggle through childhood under the gaze of worried physicians and distracted nannies, no one's changing course. Your younger sister, already promised to a second cousin in Bavaria. Your older brother, dead at 6 from a lung infection no one could stop. The answer? More cousin marriages. After all, what's one more genetic gamble when there's a kingdom on the line? Some whisper that the royal blood is cursed. Others say it's divine and misunderstood. Historians still argue whether superstition or sheer stubbornness kept these dynasties clinging to incestuous unions even after the evidence mounted. Maybe both. But for you, there's no debate, just daily life in a body that feels like it's made of crumbling sugar glass. And so, you lie there again in your gilded cradle. Tomorrow, they'll paint another portrait. They'll smooth your features, widen your eyes, and make your chin look less aggressive. But you'll still be the same fragile heir, trapped in a legacy where power flows thick and strangely shaped through your veins. You're 5 years old now, and your legs still wobble when you walk too fast across the marble floor. Your governess insists it's just growing pains, but deep down, even at this age, you suspect your body isn't quite right. Your cousins wobble too. One has a permanent drool, another hasn't spoken a full sentence in 2 years, and the third blinks one eye a little too slowly, like a broken doll. At royal dinners, you sit beside people who all sort of resemble each other. Same pointed noses, same pale skin, same narrow jaws. One cousin's ear is almost entirely missing. You once asked if it fell off. No one laughed. Instead, your mother told you not to stare. But how can you not? Everyone in this family seems like a slightly melted version of the next. See, the problem with inbreeding is that it doesn't just show up in your face. It shows up everywhere. In how you breathe, how you digest food, how your bones fuse or don't. Your cousin in Spain was born with fused vertebrae. Another in Austria had a tongue too big for his mouth. You hear whispers about a baby born with a cleft palate so severe he couldn't feed without choking. A royal tragedy, they say, but also kind of expected. Mainstream historians agree that these royal families, especially the Habsburgs and Bourbons, had shockingly high rates of inherited defects. And not just because of a one-time marriage between cousins, but because they kept doing it, over and over, generation after generation. You marry your niece. Your nephew marries his aunt. By the time you're born, you've got fewer unique ancestors than a bowl of alphabet soup. And still, nobody stops. Your tutors teach you languages French, Latin, maybe some German, but they never mention biology. Mendel's peas are still decades away, and even if someone did notice the family resemblance was getting too close, they'd never say it out loud. Criticizing the royal bloodline is treason, and the royal bloodline is your whole identity, even when it starts to betray you from the inside out. Historians still argue whether monarchs actually understood the risks they were taking. Some say they noticed the patterns: too many sickly babies, too many sudden deaths, but believed divine would correct it. Others think the obsession with keeping land and titles in the family simply outweighed all other concerns. Either way, the result was the same: a dynasty of sons who looked regal on horseback, but collapsed under the weight of their own mutated DNA. Your father, the king, has a limp he hides under custom-made boots. Your mother's brother died foaming at the mouth during a banquet. You hear it was a seizure. No one speaks of it now. They just toast with wine and rearrange marriages as though it's all part of the grand design. A fringe detail you never find in official histories. One royal kept a ledger of every marriage and every problem child, noting who turned out strange or couldn't stand long. It read more like livestock breeding notes than a family tree. That's how calculated it all became. Love wasn't in the cards. Bloodline was. And while your family continues this game of noble Jenga, you try to breathe through a nose that's perpetually blocked, teeth that grow at odd angles, and a brain that gets foggy whenever you're tired. You're 7 now, and they're already talking about who you'll marry. Your second cousin twice removed, or your first cousin once removed. Either way, she has the same narrow eyes and high forehead. The family resemblance is part of the charm, they say. You sometimes wonder, do normal children cough up blood after a run? Do other boys have to wear a brace under their tunics to stay upright? No one answers. Instead, they dress you up in brocade and pearls and parade you around like a porcelain heir. One crack away from falling apart. At royal balls, the candles flicker and the music swells. But behind the glamour is a room full of people with overlapping bloodlines and whispered health conditions. You learn to spot it. The limp masked by a cane, the way one aunt can't quite smile fully on one side of her face, the cousin who's always escorted by 2 handlers like he might wander off into a wall. One of your older uncles had a jaw so misshapen he couldn't chew solid food. They say he survived on broth and mashed figs. A court painter softened the angles in his portraits, but everyone knew. They just didn't talk about it. You begin to understand something terrifying. In this world, looking perfect is more important than being well. Appearances are curated, ailments are concealed, and children like you, children born fragile from too much shared ancestry, are taught to keep smiling even when it hurts to stand. Still, nobody changes course. Another marriage is arranged, another cousin is summoned, and another child is born with a 6th toe or a lazy eye that won't quit. The line must go on, they say, even if the line is unraveling into chaos. You press your ear to the nursery, wall-some nights, listening to the baby next door gasp for breath. The nurse hums lullabies to cover the rattling wheeze. He's your cousin too. Of course he is. You wonder if he'll make it to next winter. You wonder if you will. And as the candlelight fades and the palace grows quiet, you think about your ancestors, those smug-faced monarchs painted in grand halls, staring down at you with their matching noses and sorrowful eyes. You wonder if they knew what they were doing, if they regretted it, or if they just thought, well, it worked for us until it didn't. By the time you're 10, your tutors have started hinting at your duty to marry well, which is court code for find someone with a family tree shaped like a wreath. You don't know exactly what that means yet, but you're pretty sure it involves another cousin with translucent skin and an overbite sharp enough to split a bread roll. Your days are structured like clockwork. Breakfast with boiled eggs you can barely chew, hours of stiff Latin grammar, and afternoons practicing how to bow without fainting. But your body won't cooperate. Your knees buckle when you stand too fast, and your joints ache like they belong to someone 4 times your age. The royal physician says you just need more rest. You already sleep 12 hours a night, and still, they don't connect the dots. You're not alone, though. Across Europe, royal sons are being raised in glass houses. In France, there's talk of a boy prince who can't hear in one ear and only sees through the other. In Portugal, a young duke walks with a strange gait that makes the court whisper cursed behind gloved hands. And then there's little Charles in Spain, tiny, pale, and wide-jawed like a toad carved from ivory, who may never be able to father children at all. He's only 5. His destiny is to marry a relative and produce more Charleses. Good luck with that. One of the most infamous cases, and you'll hear his name more and more as you get older, is Charles II of Spain. Historians agree his family tree wasn't so much a tree as a spiral staircase collapsing in on itself. His inbreeding coefficient was over 25%, which, for context, is higher than if your parents were full siblings. He had a monstrous lower jaw, drooled constantly, and couldn't speak properly until he was 4. By age 35, he looked 70. When he died childless, the Habsburg dynasty in Spain died with him. Big shocker. But back in your own court, the lessons never change. Nobility means marriage within your rank, and your rank is riddled with hemophilia, scoliosis, and chins that could open letters. It's not that your parents want to hurt you. They truly believe they're preserving something sacred. They talk about pure bloodlines like it's holy water. The irony, of course, is that pure blood can be deeply polluted. Fringe accounts from royal doctors sometimes surface decades later. One scribbled note in the margins of a family Bible records a newborn prince who smelled sweet like spoiled milk and died before his christening. The entry was erased and rewritten to make it look like the child never existed. And that, too, is part of the cycle. Hide the weak, erase the failures, try again with another cousin. You find out one day, entirely by accident, that your grandfather married his niece. No one mentions this in polite company, but a bored uncle with a flask and a loose tongue spills the truth during a game of chess. We all share the same jaw, he slurs. God help us. Historians still argue whether these royal families truly believed in divine immunity from genetic decay, or whether they were simply gambling. Maybe they thought their wealth and status would shield them. Or maybe, like you, they just didn't have a choice. At court, your birthday is celebrated with fanfare. Trumpets, sugared fruit, and a parade of nobles with too many buttons on their coats. You smile through the pain in your back and the pounding in your skull. You've had a headache for 3 days. Your nurse says it's the weather. You know it's not. Your cousin across the channel, young Prince Leopold, is already betrothed to his second cousin, no less. He's 12 and walks like he's stepping on invisible nails. You hear rumors of internal bleeding when he falls, which is often. Some believe he has the bleeding disease, what we now know as hemophilia. It will become so common in royal families that historians later nickname it the royal disease. That same disease will pass down to the sons of Queen Victoria. Spoiler alert, it won't end well. You begin to notice something chilling. The sicker you get, the more praise you receive for your delicate features and ethereal grace. They call you angelic when you faint in the chapel, noble when you can't finish your lessons. Weakness in your world is wrapped in lace and paraded as refinement. One afternoon, you spy a group of stable boys wrestling in the mud outside. Their laughter is loud, unfiltered wild. You're struck with a strange ache, not in your joints this time, but in your chest. You want to be one of them. Want to move freely without worrying your lungs might collapse from exertion. But you can't. You're not allowed to even sweat too much, let alone fall. So instead, you sit by the window, watching life happen without you. A gilded ghost in a castle full of mirrors. Your family assures you you'll grow stronger with age. Just a late bloomer, your aunt says with a soft pat on your shoulder. But the doctor's face tells another story. He knows. You know. Everyone knows. And still, they match the next cousin. And the next. As if marrying each other long enough might summon a miracle instead of a miscarriage. You overhear a visiting noble whispering about a recent birth in Vienna. A baby born with fused fingers and no eyelids. They buried him before the sun set. A mercy, someone says. You look at your hands. They shake. You're 15 now, and your body feels like it's made of glass. You've mastered the court smile, That tight-lipped expression that hides pain and fatigue under powdered cheeks and noble posture. But every joint in your body is whispering secrets. Your ankles swell. Your wrists bend too far. Your jaw sometimes locks halfway through a sentence, and you finish your thought through your teeth like it's a party trick. It isn't. Meals have become a ritual of endurance. You can't eat hard bread or chew roasted meats, so they give you soft porridge, goat's milk, and overly sweet jellies. Your cousin laughs when you dribble. He can't help it. His upper lip curls naturally now, stuck in an eternal smirk. He was born that way. The royal physician blames your nervous disposition, while the priest says you must pray harder. Meanwhile, your mother frets over dowries and keeps sending portraits of you to the courts of Bavaria and Denmark. Just a bit of paint on the cheeks, she says, brushing rouge onto your waxen face. No one will notice the chin. But they do. Everyone does. Your cousin, the one you're expected to marry, has a jawline that could be mistaken for a drawer handle. He's pleasant enough, if mostly silent. He blinks slowly, talks in riddles, and has a strange habit of licking his gloves. You watch him once at a garden party, chewing tulip petals with quiet concentration while a musician plays a sad song on the lute. You know that song. It's the one they play at funerals. Historians still argue whether these subtle signs, unusual behavior, delayed speech, emotional flatness, were simply symptoms of poor upbringing or indicators of deeper neurological issues caused by inbreeding. Either way, you're surrounded by boys who look like princes but behave like shadows. They haunt the halls in velvet and silk, smiling at walls and flinching at loud noises. It's like living in a portrait gallery that occasionally coughs. You try to act normal, whatever that means here. You read books, mostly about saints and kings, all of whom seem to die very young or very holy, sometimes both. You wonder which fate is waiting for you. One day, you come across a letter sealed with your uncle's ring. It's addressed to the King of Sweden and contains a detailed proposal for uniting your houses through marriage. It even includes your measurements. Not just height and weight, but the distance between your eyes, the slope of your spine, and a note about your improved posture since taking mercury supplements. You are officially a product, a glass doll with paperwork. It's not just your generation. A servant tells you, late one evening, about a forgotten prince buried in the family crypt. He lived only 2 years, had one leg shorter than the other, and never opened his eyes. The story was scrubbed from the records, but servants remember. They always do. There's another boy, your distant cousin Ferdinand. He's not allowed in public. Some say he bites. Others whisper he believes he's a lion. He's locked in a room with blue curtains and watched by monks who read psalms in shifts. Your aunt refers to him as our little challenge. You wonder if that's what they'll call you one day, too. In this world, even birth is political. Royal babies are often born in front of witnesses, sometimes dozens of nobles, to ensure legitimacy. Privacy is a luxury reserved for commoners. And if the baby arrives with a deformity, well, it's swaddled quickly and hidden behind velvet screens. Some are declared stillborn, even if they blink. Fringe accounts describe one Habsburg birth where the newborn was immediately taken away and replaced with another child from a noble wet nurse. Too many toes, the whisper went. Better luck next time. At court, small anomalies are ignored until they become impossible to hide. A young archduke who drools is simply thoughtful. A prince who doesn't speak by age 10 is meditative. But behind closed doors, the family is panicking. Bloodlines must continue. Thrones must be filled. If you can't marry, can't produce heirs, can't sit upright through mass, what are you even for? There's a banquet in your honor, but you're not hungry. The roasted birds on the table glare at you with jeweled eyes. You pick at a custard while musicians play a jarring medley of hymns, and drinking songs. Your cousin toasts to your excellent genes, and everyone laughs. Even you. Later that night, you sit by the mirror and stare at your face. You pull your lower jaw forward slightly. There it is, that Habsburg jaw, the one passed down like a cursed crown. You run a finger along the ridge of your teeth. You wonder how many more will wear it after you. Your sleep is haunted now, not by monsters, but by cousins. Dozens of them, blank-faced, shuffling down endless hallways, calling your name with swollen tongues. You wake up soaked in sweat, and your nurse applies lavender oil to your temples. You just need a rest, she says again. You know better. A shipment arrives from the Ottoman court. Spices, silks, and a letter offering a rare political alliance. Your father reads it and snorts. Their blood is too mixed, he says. No structure, no breeding. You want to scream. You want to tell them their princes can ride horses and climb trees and chew meat without choking. But you stay silent because your jaw is tired. And now, there's talk a new match for you. Another cousin. This one is only 11, but very bright. The court seems hopeful. He can write in 2 languages and hasn't fallen ill in months. A miracle. You're to meet him at midsummer. You nod politely and go back to your room, where the air smells like dried roses and dust. You press your hands to your face and wonder how much longer you can pretend to be whole. You're 16, and the walls are starting to close in, not metaphorically. Literally. The ceilings of your palace are tall and frescoed, but the corridors are narrow, windowless, and padded with thick tapestries that muffle sound. The doors creak like nervous servants, and no one walks quickly anymore. Everyone tiptoes now, afraid of triggering another incident. You had one last week, an episode they called it. You collapsed during a procession, your knees buckling beneath the weight of your ceremonial robes. A priest waved incense over your body while courtiers looked away. Later, you heard whispers. Couldn't even finish a 10-minute mass. Too much of the blood in the bloodline. Did you see the twitching in his hand? Now, they're watching you like a glass statue that keeps vibrating when the wind hits it. They bring you tea laced with valerian, then lemon water with powdered coral. Someone suggests goat brain for mental clarity. You'd laugh if your jaw didn't ache from the effort. And you're not alone in this gilded purgatory. One of your cousins, Carl, is kept in a velvet chair near the window. He's 17, but looks 12. His eyes drift in different directions, and he hums church hymns under his breath all day long. He likes you, though. He once offered you a withered apple and said it was his heart. Historians still argue whether Carl was simply developmentally delayed or if he suffered from a specific genetic syndrome. There are too many symptoms and not enough surviving records. But what they agree on is this. Carl wasn't the exception. He was the rule. Every hallway in your family tree is crammed with fragile boys who died young, or worse, lived long enough to sit on thrones they couldn't manage. Boys like Charles II of Spain, whose lower jaw jutted so far forward he could barely chew. He was called El Hechizado, the Bewitched. Was it superstition, or just the consequences of a family that kept marrying itself? Charles's autopsy reportedly revealed just one testicle, a heart the size of a lentil, and a skull full of water. Okay, that last detail might be exaggerated by history's morbid imagination, but the truth was bad enough. He reigned, he suffered, and he died childless. The dynasty collapsed with him, like a cake too dense to rise. You're told that your cousin Wilhelm is visiting. He's from the Austrian line, the stronger side, supposedly. But when he arrives, he's pale as wax and mutters constantly. He wears gloves even in the bath and insists his food be blessed 6 times before touching his lips. He keeps a diary filled with sketches of birds with human eyes. You try to bond. You play chess, though neither of you is particularly good. You both pretend not to notice the trembling in each other's fingers. There's a family painting in the hall, a massive oil-on canvas portrait of all your male relatives from the past 100 years. You stand in front of it sometimes, staring at the long noses, heavy jaws, and sad eyes. You recognize your own features reflected back at you again and again. The artist probably just copied the same face with minor edits. Once, a court jester dared to poke fun at this repetition. He drew a cartoon of the royal family where all the princes were born from a single egg like Russian dolls. He disappeared the next day, maybe to a monastery, maybe not. One morning, you wake up to find a pigeon in your chamber. It's hopping around, confused, trapped. You try to help it escape through the window, but just flutters from one wall to the next. Eventually, it slams into the mirror and drops. You kneel beside it and whisper, saying, "A fringe tale you overhear from maid. Your great-granduncle once married a niece so closely related that their blood types clashed at birth, producing children who couldn't process sunlight. Vampires and silk." She's probably exaggerating, but stays with you. At a masquerade ball, someone dresses as a double-headed eagle. It's a joke, but no one laughs, because that symbol is your family crest. Two heads, one body, confused leadership, conflicting minds. Everyone toasts to eternal unity, but you notice one of the eagle heads has a cracked beak. A young historian arrives to work in the library. He's charming, curious, and clearly not one of you. You can tell by the way he walks, straight-backed, confident, not overly cautious. He brings new books and ideas. He tells you, gently, that some royal families in Asia avoid cousin marriage entirely. They treat the bloodline like a garden, not a vault, he says. You nod slowly. It's not a rebellion, exactly. Just the first time anyone has described your genetics without calling them pure. But purity is the goal here, right? At least that's what your uncle says when he approves yet another cousin marriage contract. The blood must not be diluted, he insists, while coughing into a lace handkerchief stained with something dark. Later, you find an old letter in the archives, written by a Spanish noblewoman who begged her daughter not to marry into your family. They have too much of themselves in themselves, she warned. It turns their hearts inward. You don't know if that's poetic or literal, but you feel it. Some days your heart does feel like it's folding in on itself. Tired, compressed, dense with obligation. There's talk of travel now. Maybe France. A change of air might do you good. You laugh, as if air could fix blood. You walk through the palace gardens with Wilhelm, who's picking leaves off every hedge and whispering to them. You don't ask why. You just walk beside him, both of you creaking like old furniture in expensive shoes. You're barely 17 now, and the words heir apparent are starting to feel more like a diagnosis than a title. You got tutors for politics, tutors for fencing, and a separate tutor to help you breathe properly when you panic before public events. They say your education is noble, but it mostly consists of sitting in echoing rooms while elderly men with trembling hands explain how to avoid war by marrying your cousin. You nod politely, try not to yawn. The truth is, the real war is in your own body. Your limbs ache randomly, your vision sometimes blurs when you stand too fast, and once, just once, you noticed a vein on your temple throbbing so hard you thought it might hum out of tune. Maybe the royal anthem. That would be fitting. You've learned to mask your struggles, to plaster on that serene royal smile like it's a second face. But your mirror knows. You look into it one morning and notice something new, a slant to your eyes, a softening of your jawline, a sort of vague blending. You're starting to look like every other royal portrait in the hallway. Historians still argue whether these overlapping features were due to specific hereditary syndromes or simply the result of centuries of close genetic pairing. One thing's for sure, though, Your family's obsession with keeping the bloodline pure has made it anything but strong. A fringe theory you once overheard suggests that several royal houses of Europe actually used secret surrogates to produce healthier children. Milkmaids, noble bastards, even captured enemy daughters, anyone with fresh blood. If true, it's the most unroyal thing your family ever did, and possibly the most intelligent. But in public, the performance continues. You ride a white horse during parades, even though it gives you hives. You wave to the crowd, though your wrist cramps halfway through. And during royal dinners, you eat bread soaked in wine because solid food makes you nauseous. That's when they start whispering about the illness. They don't say what it is, of course. That would be too honest. Instead, they drape it in euphemisms: delicate constitution, sensitive nerves, a case of melancholy. But you hear your nursemaid weeping behind the curtain after she changes your bed sheets. You know, your cousin Friedrich visits next. He's quiet too, but sharp-eyed. He likes to paint and shows you a canvas he's been working on for weeks. It's a royal crest, distorted, melting like something left too long in the sun. Instead of lions and swords, there are broken feathers and bleeding vines. You ask him what it means. He shrugs and says, "I just painted what I saw." You don't know whether to be impressed or concerned. Meanwhile, your tutors shift gears. Instead of preparing you to govern, they now spend hours rehearsing how you'll announce your betrothal. The bride is another cousin, your third or maybe fourth, but close enough that you've shared at least one nursemaid in infancy. She's pale and soft-spoken, but her gaze is calculating. You know she's been coached as much as you. At the engagement banquet, you nearly choke on a pearl hidden inside a dessert. A courtier jokes that the pearl represents purity and that your body rejected it. You don't laugh. Neither does the courtier once he sees your face. That night, you lie awake, remembering stories of your uncle Leopold, who married his niece and spent the next 10 years losing sons one by one. 3 dead by age 6. 1 born without a jaw. The last survived to age 12, but never spoke a word. You imagine them all lined up at the gates of your mind, waiting their turn to haunt your dreams. There's a darker rumor, of course, the kind whispered between laundresses and stable boys, that your family line is cursed, not by magic, but by stubbornness. That every time one cousin marries another, a small piece of fate gets twisted tighter, like thread pulled until it snaps. Some say there's a book hidden in the royal library, wrapped in lambskin, that details every medical complaint suffered by your lineage. Brittle bones, bleeding gums, unexplained seizures, annotations in the margins by worried doctors from 3 generations ago. No one will let you see it. You try asking your mother about it once, during a quiet afternoon when the candles burned low. She stiffens, sets down her embroidery, and says only, "That book is not for you." Then she changes the subject to your posture, so you study yourself instead. Every freckle, every twitch, every dream. You start keeping your own secret log. Headaches, breathlessness, that strange pressure behind your left eye that comes and goes like a tide. You draw tiny portraits of your ancestors in the margins. Most of them look like you. One day, you faint again, this time during a cabinet meeting. You wake to your father's stern face, though his hands are shaking. He says, "You mustn't be weak. Our people need strength." You almost say, "Then stop marrying your sisters." But you don't. You nod and promise to drink more goat milk. You hear about other dynasties starting to modernize. The Swedes and the Dutch, they're letting their princes marry outside the usual noble circles now. Gasp! Commoners! Scandalous. And yet, their children seem robust, clever, painfully alive. You envy them. Later, you write to one of them, Prince Axel, who married a schoolteacher and now lives in a countryside villa. He replies in simple language, talks about building a garden, says his son just learned to swim. You reread the letter 20 times. Then your cousin Friedrich brings you a second painting. It's the same crest, but this time one of the eagle heads has flown away. The body remains, wounded but lighter. There's blue sky in the background. You ask him, what happened to the second head? He smiles and says, it wanted to see what the world looked like from a distance. And for a fleeting second, you imagine what that would feel like. You're barely breathing by the time they move you to the summer palace, a place designed more for appearances than comfort. Marble columns, silk wall hangings, and staircases wide enough for 4 horses to ascend side by side. None of which you actually need, but all of which scream prestige to visiting dignitaries. You, however, are mostly confined to a velvet draped bed and a chair that creaks every time you shift your weight. Doctors hover around you like anxious bees, scribbling notes in ink so thick it smudges your fingertips when you try to sneak a peek. One of them whispers something about hydrocephalus. Another suggests a rare blood disorder only seen in high-born lineages. You try to keep track, but eventually all the diagnoses blur into one long string of Latin that might as well say, because your family tree is a circle. Historians still argue whether the condition that afflicts you most, those piercing migraines followed by numbness, was inherited from your Spanish ancestors or an unlucky fluke of Habsburg stubbornness. Either way, it's not helping your chances of survival. Your cousin Friedrich sends another painting, this one more abstract. A child sitting on a throne made of bones, surrounded by mirrors that only reflect shadows. You pin above your desk like a talisman. Morbid? Maybe. Accurate? Deeply. The court has begun to whisper more openly now. One chambermaid was dismissed for referring to you as the last candle in a gust of wind. She thought it was poetic. Your father didn't. Meanwhile, your mother arranges another engagement, just in case the first one doesn't produce results. Yes, that's the language they use now. Not love, not even alliance, just results like your crop being inspected for yield. And you begin to understand something profound and quietly horrifying. Your value to the crown is not in who you are, but in what you can incubate. You try to walk one morning and collapse halfway across the marble floor. The dog whimpers beside you. A servant rushes to help, and for the first time you hear someone speak the words plainly. You may not be long for this world. You want to scream, not because it's untrue, but because you still have questions. Like, how did no one think this through? How did a continent's worth of kings and queens decide it was better to marry within their blood than to risk losing a surname? A fringe theory you once read in a smuggled pamphlet claims that inbreeding among royals was less about tradition and more about control. Keep the line clean, and you also keep the power pool small, manageable. No outsiders, no surprises, just sons who look like cousins and cousins who double as wives. Neat and tidy, until one of those tidy boys is born with a cleft palate and a 6th toe. You remember the paintings in the Hall of Forgotten Heirs. Little boys in ermine capes with strange eyes or exaggerated jaws. One was sealed behind a curtain for decades after his death. Supposedly, he could never walk or speak. They say his portrait had to be repainted because his head was too large for the frame. You wonder how many of these princes were just like you, sick, tired, and expected to smile while their insides broke down. And then there's the matter of your younger brother. He's 7, bright-eyed, and so far shows no signs of the family sickness. The doctors say it's a miracle. You suspect it's more likely the milkmaid rumor finally came true. You watch how your father looks at him. Proud, relieved, a little guilty. He never looked at you that way. You start writing letters to yourself, as though you're already gone. You leave them tucked in books, behind curtains under the mattress. They say things like, if you're reading this, the dynasty probably ended, or maybe marry someone with entirely different blood next time, yeah? Your fiancée visits with her chaperone and offers a hand like she's reaching for a wax figure. You talk about weather and music and pretend your leg isn't spasming under the table. She doesn't look at you, not really. You get the feeling she's memorizing your face like someone studying a ghost they'll need to describe later. At night, you dream of Spain, sun, music, orange groves, and children who run without handlers. You've never been, of course, but your great-grandmother came from there, and you like to think some part of her memory filtered into your blood before everything else got murky. Friedrich's latest gift is a sculpture this time, carved from pale wood. It's a tree with all the branches twisting back into each other, forming a knot. The roots stick straight up tangled. There's no trunk. It's disturbing and brilliant, and probably banned in 3 courts. You show it to your tutor, who goes pale and says, "It's not proper." You leave it by the window anyway. By now, the palace has quietly begun to make other arrangements. There's talk of naming your uncle's son as provisional heir. He's strong, tall, and shaped like someone who ate food that wasn't just white bread and boiled meat. You try not to resent him, but it's hard when he rides your favorite horse and starts using your study. You start spending more time in the garden, or what little of it you're allowed. The roses are overbred, too, and many of them have stopped blooming entirely. You run your fingers along their thorns and think, well, at least they didn't choose each other. When the ministers come to review your estate in case of a premature transition, you pretend to be asleep. One of them says it's tragic. He was a good boy. And somehow, that's what stings the most. You aren't gone yet. You're still here, tangled up in royal linens and legacy, trying not to fall apart while your own name is being written into the history books in past tense. You wake one morning to a peculiar silence. Not the kind that settles over a room in peace, but the kind that implies people are whispering about you just beyond the door. And they are. You can hear the soft shuffle of slippers, the creak of the floorboard near the eavesdropping alcove, the quick, shushed mutterings that trail off whenever your nurse enters the room. You're not dying today, at least not that you know of. But someone important is visiting. The Archbishop of Salzburg, maybe. Or worse, your Uncle Leopold, the one who never blinks and smells like lavender and salt pork. You sit straighter in bed, aware that how you hold your spoon at breakfast might become a topic in someone else's report. The spoon, by the way, is silver-plated and annoyingly heavy. Like most things in your life, beautiful, expensive, and completely impractical. Your personal physician checks your gums again. Still pale, he mutters, but no bleeding. That's something. You nod like that's encouraging. He pats your hand and asks how your appetite is, which is a cruel joke when all the palace cooks can prepare is overboiled chicken and pasty porridge. You've learned to chew slowly and lie creatively. Excellent, you say. I nearly finished my toast. This is a lie. The toast has the texture of sandpaper and smells faintly like mothballs. You've taken to feeding bits of it to a small bird that roosts outside your window. You've named him Alfonso after your great-grandfather. The resemblance is uncanny, beady-eyed and twitchy. Historians still argue whether Alfonso the Great's erratic mood swings were a result of untreated syphilis or, inbreeding. Either way, he once outlawed garlic because it smelled too peasant-like, so maybe your little bird namesake is a step up. Anyway, the guest arrives. It's not Leopold. It's worse. It's a matchmaker. Not just any matchmaker, though. One sent by the House of Bourbon, bearing sketches of eligible girls like you're flipping through a catalog of vaguely related cousins. One has a hooked nose and a chin like a teacup handle. Another is described as plump with good birthing hips, which sounds like she's being sold at auction. The last portrait is blank, too delicate for sunlight. The envoy says cryptically. You ask why they're still trying to marry you off. Your mother answers with a tight smile. Because the name must go on. The name, of course, is longer than your arm and comes with a list of titles no one actually uses. But it must go on, even if the body carrying it limps, drools, or dies before the wedding night. Your tutor gives you a book on Charles II of Spain to distract you. Remember him? The one with the jaw so deformed he could barely chew? You get 2 chapters in before it becomes too real. He was locked in a palace most of his life, surrounded by people pretending he was brilliant while he forgot his own name. You close the book and look in the mirror. Your eyes are sharp. You're not gone. Not yet. But you are afraid of how close it feels. There's a knock at the door, and it's your younger brother again, this time bringing you a gift, a locket. Inside is a miniature painting of your grandfather. You want to tell him that the man in the picture was terrifying and possibly mad, but you say thank you instead. Will you be king? Your brother asks, eyes wide. You hesitate. Maybe, if my bones behave. He laughs, thinking it's a joke. It isn't. Later, during your strengthening walk around the garden, more like a shuffle supported by 2 servants and a discreet cane, you pass the old marble bench where your aunt used to sit with her embroidery. She died young. Everyone says it was melancholia, but your nurse once whispered that her lungs were full of fluid from a heart that never beat right. You touch the bench and wonder how many of your ancestors are still lingering around in their favorite palace corners, haunting the walls with names too long to fit on tombstones. A court painter comes to do a new portrait. For posterity, he says, which you're beginning to realize is code for just in case. He tries to make you look more robust, broadening the shoulders, sharpening the jawline. You don't recognize yourself in the final sketch. It looks like a young man who eats red meat and dances without falling over. You ask him to leave it unfinished. The weeks blur again. Your fever returns, then disappears, then returns stronger. You hallucinate briefly. Something about a banquet table filled with rotting fruit and women in masks. When you wake, there are 3 doctors in the room, one of them openly crying. You ask if it's serious. They say no, just precaution. They lie. You start drafting letters to your potential fiancés. The tone is polite but honest. If we marry, I cannot guarantee children or dancing or even long walks. I can promise books, birds, and attempts at poetry. Your mother intercepts them before they're sent. No one needs to know the whole truth, she says. You reply, then they're marrying a ghost. She doesn't answer. A fringe theory circulates in a secret corner of court. Someone whispers that all royal children should be adopted from peasant stock, raised in secrecy, then revealed when the time is right. Healthier blood, they say, fewer surprises. It's absurd, obviously, but is it? You begin to imagine it. A royal boy born from farmers, strong as an ox, clever as a fox. No tremors, no twisted limbs. Just clean, anonymous blood. You fall asleep with that image in your head and dream of crowns being passed over hedgerows and gold-plated cradles buried beneath oak trees. When you wake, the bird Alfonso is gone. A hawk got him, probably. You stare at the empty windowsill longer than you mean to. Then you pick at your breakfast, nod through your doctor's visit, and practice signing your name, just in case this is your last good day. Your tutor notices the quiet and sits with you in silence. After a long pause, he says, even broken clocks are right twice a day. You respond, but they're still broken. Outside, the roses haven't bloomed. The roots are confused, the petals stiff. Someone suggests replanting them. You watch from the window and wonder if roots can even grow in the same soil once they've eaten themselves from the inside out. You're 14 now, or maybe 15. No one seems entirely sure anymore. Your birthday was postponed twice due to a funeral and an outbreak of sweating sickness, and the candles on your last cake melted before anyone sang. You stop counting after 12, honestly. Age is a strange concept in your world, where people live twice as long as they should or vanish before the ink dries on their baptismal papers. And today, you're being fitted for armor. Not real armor. Mind you, this is more ceremonial, more parade than battlefield. But the chest plate is real metal, cold against your skin, and heavy enough to make your spine protest. The tailor flinches when he pulls the straps too tight. "Sorry, sire," he says, like you might keel over right then and there. You give him a smile that hurts to fake. "Just don't drop the sword on my toes." Not that you'll be holding a sword. That's too dangerous for someone with shaky hands and brittle wrists. But you'll ride a horse. Well, you'll be placed on one, strapped and discreetly. The animal will walk 5 steps in front of the cheering crowd before you're whisked away by stable boys and doctors. Still, it's a show of strength, a royal performance. They say the people need to see you, alive, upright, capable. You need to believe it too. But the truth is, your hips pop out of place when you sneeze. You sleep with braces on your knees. Your teeth fall out in your sleep. Historians still argue whether the Habsburg jaw alone could cause such a cocktail of dysfunction, or whether multiple inherited disorders, like hemophilia, epilepsy, and some kind of undiagnosed syndrome, played tag team with your DNA. Some even suggest environmental toxins or early childhood fevers were to blame. Others whisper that you were doomed before you were born. Whatever the cause, you know what it feels like to live in a body you cannot trust. And worse, to have your fragility paraded like a trophy. So, you ride the horse. Or rather, the horse carries you. The crowd cheers, and you wave with your gloved hand. Never the bare one. Never show the fingers bent like twisted quills. From a distance, you look perfect, regal, tall. Your tunic is stitched with gold thread, and your boots were shined with crushed pearl paste this morning. You wonder if the people can smell your fear. You wonder if they know your legs are strapped to the saddle. Later, in your chamber, you throw up the sweet wine they gave you to steady your nerves. Your doctor pretends it's just motion sickness. Your nurse pretends not to see you cry. That night, you dream of falling, not from the horse, but from a throne made of glass. It shatters beneath you, and no one rushes to help. They just sweep up the shards and prepare a new throne for your younger brother. Speaking of him, he's growing fast. Broad shoulders, strong chin, a laugh that shakes the walls. Your mother beams at him during meals and touches your shoulder only when you cough. You pretend not to notice. He's kind to you, though. Brings you figs when the kitchens have extra. Reads your letters out loud when your eyes ache. He tells you you're still the eldest, and the title can't be taken away. You know better. In your world, titles are only real if your heart keeps beating. One day, a rumor reaches the palace. An illegitimate cousin has been spotted traveling through Spain. Healthy, handsome, possibly blessed with none of the complications. Your advisors panic quietly. The portraits are compared. I scrutinized. Bloodlines traced. Nothing comes of it, but the fear lingers in the halls like incense. You're not afraid of being replaced. You're afraid of being forgotten. A court jester once joked that kings are like candles, beautiful when lit, quickly discarded when they flicker. He was dismissed the next day. You sometimes wonder if he meant it kindly. So you start writing. Not official proclamations or treaties. Personal things, observations, feelings. You hide the journals behind the tapestries in your chamber. You write about the ache behind your ribs and the smell of lavender oil they rub on your joints. You write about the dream thrones and the coldness of armor. You write about your favorite bird, the way your brother hums when nervous, and the girl from the Bourbon house who sent you a poem instead of a portrait. You never met her. She died of fever before the match was arranged. Fringe historians later find your journal fragments. If they're real, that is. Some believe them to be forgeries. Others argue they're too poetic to be the product of someone with your ailments. No royal boy wrote this, one scholar insists. It's the work of a ghostwriter, surely. A ghost. The word stings. Still, you write. You fill pages until your fingers swell. Then dictate to your nurse when your throat allows. The stories are mostly about people like you. Broken bodies, uncertain futures, brilliant minds trapped inside paper-thin bones. You begin to ask more questions than you answer. Was your father truly as noble as his eulogies claimed? Or was he simply lucky to live before the symptoms caught up? Why did no one break the cycle? Why did cousins continue to marry cousins when the results were plain to see? Historians still argue whether royal advisors were naive or criminally complicit, whether religion played a larger role than recorded, with divine right justifying biological ruin, whether the pursuit of purity was actually a slow, glittering suicide. You don't have the answers. You only have the mirror. Your reflection hasn't changed much. Eyes too deep, jaw a little too soft, cheekbones like you're always a little sick. But you've learned to smile at it. Not fondly, not yet, but with recognition. This is the face of someone who wasn't supposed to be here, who keeps waking up when the doctors expect silence. You begin learning your own history, not the approved version, but the real stories. The uncle who had seizures in secret, the aunt who refused to marry her cousin and was shipped to a convent, the brother who died at 9 from a fall that was clearly not accidental. Your family tree isn't a tree. It's a circle, a slow spiral inward, winding tighter with each generation. And you're somewhere near the center. You sit by the window now, a little older, a little quieter. The breeze smells like citrus. Someone's harvesting oranges again, and the rustle of palm fronds almost covers the distant sound of hooves on cobblestone. Another parade, probably. Another cousin showing off how healthy and promising they look in velvet and polished boots. You used to wave. Now you just observe, because by this point, your name has already started fading from the lips of ambassadors and marriage brokers. They speak more often of your younger brother now, of how strong his voice is when he addresses the council, how easily he lifts a sword, how good he looks in oil portraits. You become a background figure, occasionally referenced in prayers or polite toasts. The prince who might have been, if only. You spend more time with the scholars lately. Not the ones paid to flatter you, but the older ones who've stopped caring whether they're promoted or exiled. They tell you strange things about bones from ancient burial mounds that show similar deformities, about medieval monasteries where monks kept secret records of royal ailments. One of them shows you a diagram of a genetic chart. You don't understand every line, but the meaning is clear enough. Your family tree is a loop, and you're caught in the knot. Historians still argue whether the royal obsession with lineage preservation came from ignorance or desperation. Some claim kings and queens didn't understand recessive traits. Others argue they understood all too well and married cousins anyway because it gave them control. Better a sick heir you can predict than a healthy one with inconvenient loyalties. And somewhere in between those theories, you sit, the living proof. You begin to see the pattern everywhere, not just in your own court, but across Europe. The Bourbon kings of France with their rumors of madness and mood swings. The Spanish royals who bore more stillbirths than healthy children. The Austrian Empire limping under the weight of sons too weak to rule, daughters too sick to bear more heirs. There's a strange comfort in that. You're not alone. You're one of a generation, no, a legacy of fragile monarchs, bound together not by choice, but by chromosomes. A fringe theory you overhear from a Flemish alchemist. Don't ask how he got into your palace. Long story. Suggests that inbreeding wasn't just tolerated, but ritualized. A kind of spiritual purification. He even has a term for it. Blood sanctification. You pretend to laugh, but something about it sticks. You wonder if your blood was ever yours to begin with. You're learning to walk again, this time with a cane. It has an ivory handle carved into the shape of a lion. You think that's a bit optimistic. A goat might have been more accurate. Still, the lion makes people look twice. It gives you presence, which is all that matters in court. They don't need to know how much your legs ache when you sit too long. They don't need to see how many hours it takes your nurse to dress you each morning. Because despite everything, despite the bones and the rumors and the quiet pity in your mother's eyes, you're still being prepped for kingship. The paperwork has been signed, the tutors are on standby, and the tailors keep resizing your coronation robes. But you know the truth. You're Plan A only because no one's brave enough to announce Plan B. Still, you try. You study diplomacy. You practice speeches. You memorize border treaties and military placements. You've even started taking chess more seriously. You lose most games, but your strategy's improving. Then comes the fever. It starts as a cough, the kind your doctors always brush off as dust in the lungs. But the cough doesn't stop. It grows louder, deeper, crueler. By the second week, you're coughing up something red. They quarantine your chamber. They bring in every herb, incense, and relic they can find. One priest smears oil on your feet and whispers something about Saint Sebastian. Another one cries. Your brother visits only once, standing 6 feet away with a scarf over his face. You wave. He waves back. You both pretend it's fine. Historians still argue whether your illness was pneumonia or tuberculosis, or a new mutation of something no one documented. Some say it was the inbreeding, finally catching up to your immune system. Others think it was simply bad luck. But no one debates how quickly it spread. You survive, somehow. You always do. But the fever leaves a scar, not just on your lungs, but on your reputation. Whispers circle the court like hawks. Will he ever be strong enough to lead? What happens if the fever returns? Should we start grooming the younger brother more aggressively? You're not even allowed to attend public mass anymore. The risk is too high. Instead, you kneel on your bedroom floor, facing a small icon, praying for strength you know won't come through your bones. You begin to write again, more urgently this time. Not just feelings, but instructions, ideas, hopes. You title one letter, "In case I am not the one." You seal it with wax and hide it beneath your mattress. You start asking for stories about other sickly heirs, ones who rule briefly or not at all. You hear of a French dauphin who never spoke above a whisper and ruled through messengers. A Bavarian prince who couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes, but designed brilliant irrigation systems. They weren't failures, just different victories. Maybe that could be you. Maybe you don't have to win battles or sire 10 children to leave a mark. Maybe the candle doesn't need to be tall, just warm enough to light a page. So you start teaching. The younger courtiers come to your chamber for lessons in history and philosophy. You even lecture once, softly, from your bed, with the wool blanket across your knees. They listen, not out of pity, but curiosity. And when they leave, you're not lonely. You're content, not strong, not healthy, but alive and somehow enough. Your name still carries weight, even if your footsteps don't. People bow a little lower when they speak to you now, not because of power, but out of habit and maybe a bit of guilt. The palace has stopped pretending you're invincible. The physicians don't make grand promises anymore. Instead, they mutter to each other behind thick curtains, scribbling symptoms like a priest scribbles sins. But you started noticing something else, too. Your little cousin, barely 13, has been sitting in more council meetings. He listens more than he speaks, but his questions are sharp. Too sharp for someone who still can't grow a proper mustache. You catch your uncle smiling at him with that look. The same look they used to give you. Another replacement in the wings. You'd be insulted, but honestly, you're too tired to care. Across the continent, your counterparts suffer similar fates. There's Leopold, the prince from Bavaria who collapsed during a horse race and never recovered. His family blamed the saddle. The physicians blamed delicate blood. But you and every other royal with brittle limbs and foggy lungs know exactly what it was. The genes. The loop. Historians still argue whether that generation of royalty was cursed by its pride or just outmaneuvered by nature. Either way, the outcome was the same. Dozens of fragile heirs, brittle like sugar glass. Beautiful, ceremonial, and breakable. You spend more time outside now, despite the warnings. The sun makes your joints ache less, and the garden doesn't ask questions. Sometimes, if you're lucky, a court musician wanders nearby, humming tunes you used to dance to at festivals. You hum along, softly, pretending your lungs are strong enough for full notes. The royal tailor stops by one morning with a half-finished robe, deep blue with gold stitching. For the midwinter feast, he says. You nod politely, but don't mention the other robes he's sewn for you, the ones you never got to wear. The coronation robe, the wedding tunic, the ceremonial armor they made just in case. Most of them still hang untouched in a cedarwood closet. Instead, you talk about fabric, color, texture. You ask him which dyes came from which cities. He lights up when you ask questions. It's a rare thing, someone enjoying your company without calculating your usefulness. Then there's the night your father calls you into his study. He's older now, too, but still dresses like the war hero he once was, epaulets, polished boots, the whole parade. His voice is tired but firm. He tells you he's proud, that you've grown wise, that the people admire your resilience. And then he says the thing you've feared for years. Your brother will begin taking on more responsibilities. He doesn't say you're being passed over. He doesn't have to. Historians still argue whether second sons were ever truly considered equal heirs, or if the illusion was maintained simply to keep order in the court. Some think fathers always knew which son would carry the torch, and which would quietly hold it until the flames went out. You nod at your father. You say you understand. You shake his hand, and when you return to your chamber, you cry exactly one tear. Not because you're sad, but because your left eye has always watered uncontrollably when you feel anything too strongly. A weird quirk. Another charming souvenir from your gene pool. Your brother visits the next morning. He brings you figs and honey, your favorite. You talk about books. Horses. The new ambassador from Florence. You pretend it's just another visit between siblings. But he bows a little deeper when he leaves. Not out of formality, out of respect, maybe even sympathy. The next month, a court painter arrives. He says the crown wants a new portrait of you, one for the royal gallery. You sit for hours while he sketches. He doesn't hide the slope in your shoulders or the way your hands curl slightly when they rest. He paints them all, honestly, softly. You thank him when it's done. A week later, you pass the painting in the main hall. People gather around it, whispering. Some compliment the brushwork. Others tilt their heads, puzzled. He looks so tired, one noblewoman murmurs. You smile to yourself. If only she knew. You begin writing letters again. Long ones. To your brother. To your father. Even to the little cousin with the sharp eyes. You fill them with advice, but not orders. With lessons, but not lectures. And then, one day, you send a letter to the historians. The court doesn't like it, but you don't care. You dictate a record of your life. Not the official version, but the real one. You describe the aches, the ceremonies, the hopes you once had. You describe the loneliness, the weight of being too sacred to touch, too delicate to trust. In a footnote, you write, if this account is ever read aloud, I hope it puts someone to sleep, not out of boredom, but because they finally feel seen. Fringe scholars still debate whether this letter was real or apocryphal. Some claim it never existed, others say it was buried with you. A few eccentric professors insist it resurfaced centuries later, found tucked inside a hollow cane. You're not around to confirm either way. But the letter, the idea of it, lives on, just like you wanted. You no longer walk unaided. A servant, always discreet, always silent, now stands beside you like a shadow, ready to catch you if your knees betray you again. The corridors feel longer. The stairs? Impossible. They've set up a smaller chamber for you on the lower floor, one without the grand views, but closer to the garden you love. You trade scenery for access. Another quiet loss. The irony isn't lost on you. You, born to command armies and broker treaties, now find victory in standing up without wobbling. Your physicians give it a noble spin. Your Highness remains dignified in all conditions, but you see the truth in their darting eyes. They can't fix what you are. No one can. At night, you hear whispers outside your chamber. Courtiers wondering who'll be next. They assume you're asleep, drugged by whatever concoction the royal apothecary last pushed into your veins. But you're listening, always listening. You remember your cousin Carlos, not the Spanish king, though yes, him too, the one who couldn't chew food properly and collected holy relics like they were trading cards, but the quieter cousin, the one who died at 16, covered in sores. No one said the word inbreeding then. They called it God's will or a delicate temperament. But the servants knew. The nursemaids knew. The animals knew. Even the dogs kept a cautious distance. Historians still argue whether European royals were truly blind to the genetic risks, or whether they just hoped tradition would outrun biology. But with each generation, the gene pool shrank like old velvet, faded, frayed, stubborn. By the time you were born, the nobles weren't even discreet about it. A good match, they'd say, which really meant her chin is only slightly pronounced, or he hasn't had a seizure in over a year. You smile bitterly thinking about it now. A royal tinder, but with scrolls and sigils instead of swipes. The chapel bell tolls one morning. Another death. Not yours, surprisingly. An aunt, one of the healthier ones. Choked on a bone at breakfast. You attend the service, propped up in a carriage like a porcelain doll. People nod respectfully. They look at you like you're next. Honestly, you can't argue. The eulogy describes her as bright, fierce, and full of promise. You lean toward your aide and whisper, "She once chased me with a chamber pot." He tries not to laugh. Good man. The days blur. Winter settles in. You used to hate the cold, but now it numbs the pain, so you welcome it. Snowflakes drift past your window, and for a moment, it feels like the world's slowing down just for you. Then your mother visits. She doesn't knock. She never did. Her hair is silver now, styled with precision sharp enough to slice bread. She takes your hand. Her fingers are colder than the snow. "I had dreams for you," she says quietly. "Real ones. Not thrones. Not marriages. Just hope." You nod. You know. She stays longer than expected. You both sit in silence, the kind that feels comfortable, like an old song you've heard too many times to sing along anymore. When she leaves, she presses something into your palm. A ring. Too small to fit now, but once yours. You used to chew on it during long ceremonies when you were 5. You'd forgotten it even existed. You keep it by your bed. A week later, the court physician brings you something strange, a telescope. "For the stars," he says, avoiding eye contact. It's meant to distract you, you're sure. But you take to it. At night, wrapped in fur, you sit by the window and search the sky. There's Orion and Cassiopeia, and that one star you swear moves each time you look away. You imagine a world beyond this one. A kingdom where the bloodlines aren't cursed, where princes run fast and breathe deep and eat whatever they like. Maybe in that world, you dance. Maybe in that world, you laugh without coughing. Fringe thinkers in your court once believed the stars could influence royal fate. That planetary alignments explained madness, misfortune, even who fell in love. Most of them were dismissed, their scrolls banned. But tonight, as you gaze up and feel your heart do that odd stutter again, you wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were onto something. A servant knocks. There's a gift. It's a portrait of a younger cousin, the new heir. Everyone knows it. He stands tall, one hand on a globe, the other holding a scroll. His jaw is straight, his eyes confident. You can almost hear the future in the brushstrokes. You ask the servant to hang it in your chamber, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. The line continues. The story goes on, crooked, cracked, but moving forward. You write one more letter. This time, it's short, just 4 words. Tell the truth gently. You don't sign it. It disappears into the court archives, labeled simply, from an unknown noble. Your joints ache when you wake, not from sleep. There wasn't much of that, but from simply existing. You don't fight it anymore. The pain has become background music, a soft hum woven into the fabric of your days, like the rustling of silk robes or the endless clack of shoes in marble corridors. They've stopped calling you promising. Now it's stoic, resilient, or worse, graceful in decline. Words with satin edges that still cut deep. Your meals arrive lukewarm, carefully pureed. You remember roast fowl and honeyed pears, but now even applesauce feels like a challenge. Once, royalty meant feasts. Now, your body can't even digest milk properly. Historians still argue whether lactose intolerance was common among European royal bloodlines or simply an outcome of prolonged dietary oddities. You lean toward the latter. After all, your cousin drank nothing but warm beer for 10 years and claimed it kept the visions at bay. The mirror is kinder these days. You rarely look. Your room has changed again. Fewer books, more pillows. A gentle scent of lavender lingers in the air, one of your last indulgences. You ask for it specifically, not because it calms you, though it does, but because your father once wore lavender oil. On rare days when he wasn't shouting or asleep. Now, he's just a shadow in your memories. A man in a doublet, pacing the study, worrying over treaties and bloodlines. Never you. You're my duty, he once told you. You were 7. That line still stings more than any diagnosis. They bring news from Vienna, another prince born. Healthy, vigorous, pink as a peach. Everyone's hopeful. You wonder aloud how closely related the parents are. The messenger pretends not to hear. You're not surprised. Truth has a way of echoing in silence around here. It's cold again. You hear rats in the walls. And that's when the letters begin. Not to you, those stopped years ago, but about you. You hear whispers that the court is preparing an announcement. Something poetic and vague, with enough flourishes to distract from the cracks. A royal stepping back for health, perhaps. Gracious retirement. You roll your eyes. You still have sharpness. You still think, still notice, still feel. But none of that matters if you can't perform the role. If you can't ride, debate, charm, seduce, rule. Royalty isn't about feeling. It's about visibility, presentation, the illusion of strength, even when it's all just powder and posture. You're not alone, of course. History is littered with yous, princelings and dukes, archduchesses and tsaриnas, born too twisted or too fragile or too stillborn to matter. Most were buried quietly. Some were hidden in country estates. One French noblewoman, born with a withered arm and a crooked spine, was kept in a monastery for 20 years before anyone admitted she'd ever existed. You suppose you're lucky, in a way. You still have a name, a title, a window. You write again. A diary this time. Not for posterity, just for breath. A place where you don't have to be your highness or the honorable. Just you. Today my fingers shook less. Lavender's still blooming. I remembered a joke about geese and forgot the punchline. You find yourself laughing more. Quietly, like a secret. One morning, a young girl visits. A cousin, perhaps. She's too shy to say much, but she stares at you with open, unfiltered curiosity. Not pity, not reverence, just human interest. You offer her sweet. She declines but smiles. Her teeth are straight. You ask her name. It's Charlotte. Of course it is. There are 7 Charlottes in your family tree. You remember the one who wore a wig at 8 to hide bald spots. She died at 11. The one before her lost her voice after a fever and never spoke again. This one, she hums to herself while staring out the window. You envy her freedom. Later that night, you imagine what your life could have been if the blood had been different. If your great-great-grandparents hadn't been second cousins. If your grandmother hadn't married her uncle. If your lineage looked more like a tree and less like a circle drawn by a nervous hand. But wishing feels useless. Historians still argue whether royal inbreeding was a matter of ignorance, arrogance, or necessity. Maybe it was all 3. An empire built on closeness. Too close. Like silk stitched so tightly it rips with one tug. You remember hearing about a Habsburg who claimed he could smell thunder before storms. Everyone thought it was a poetic flourish, but maybe it was something deeper, something neural, something genetic. Your own talents aren't so dramatic, but you've always known when someone is lying. Even as a child, even your mother. That skill hasn't dulled. You sense what's coming. Another winter approaches. They've begun measuring the drapes for morning colors. The fabric's already in storage. Black velvet with silver trim, of course. Regal, timeless, and so very final. You aren't scared. Not exactly. Just tired. You hold that ring again, the one your mother gave you. It's warm from your palm. It fits the tiniest finger now. You write one last thing in your diary. I was here. I mattered. I love the stars. Then you place it beneath your pillow like a secret note for some future historian to find and debate endlessly. Did he mean literal stars? They'll ask. Or something more symbolic? The answer, of course, is both. The bells ring far too softly for anyone to care. You're still here, though your presence feels thinner now, more echo than substance. The air shifts when you move, but barely. You feel translucent, like wax melting from a candle, holding its shape out of sheer memory. The staff tiptoe around you now, not out of respect, but caution. You see it in their glances, the quiet fear that they'll be the one who finds you still. No one wants that honor, not even the priest who checks in once a week with practiced comfort and fading patience. They've brought in a portraitist again, some Italian with soft hands and a strange fixation on your eyelids. To capture your soul, he says. You think he just doesn't want to paint your jawline. Fair enough. The Habsburg chin has not been kind to you, or anyone for that matter. Your cousin, the one who's next in line, sent a letter. It's full of flourishes. How brave you've been. How grateful the family is. How God will reward your dignity. You laugh, so hard you cough blood. Dignity wasn't part of the deal. You were born to marry someone you shared 18.75% of your DNA with and die before your teeth finished coming in. That was the blueprint. Historians still argue whether these hereditary patterns were fully understood or conveniently ignored. There are records, letters, physician notes, confidential autopsies scattered across Europe like crumbs in a very elaborate cake. But no smoking gun. No one royal ever said, yes, we knew the babies would suffer, but the bloodline came first. Not in public, at least. In private? Who knows? Your hands shake as you draw another breath. You picture your ancestors doing the same, trembling in palaces, wasting in silence, their portraits smoothed over by kind artists. There's something oddly comforting in the thought. Misery, but shared, like being trapped in an exclusive club with no exit. You've been thinking about your great-uncle Leopold lately, the one who insisted the moon was angry with him. He painted his windows black and refused to eat round fruit. Bananas were fine. Oranges were not. They locked him in a summer villa until he died quietly during a harp concert. The family said he had melancholic sensitivities. You suspect he just saw things a little too clearly. You've also been dreaming of teeth. Yours falling out. Others watching you. Jawbones stacked like bricks. A mouth that never closes. Your nurse says it's probably the laudanum. You pretend to agree. Someone plays the harp again. Not for you. Just echoing from a chamber down the corridor. It's out of tune. You let the sound wrap around your ribs like a slow exhale. You can still smell the lavender, though it's faint now. A memory more than a scent. That young cousin, Charlotte, returned once more. Brought you a violet. Said it reminded her of you. You wanted to say thank you, but your mouth didn't cooperate. She seemed to understand. There's a soft knock, always soft, and the doctor enters. He asks questions you don't answer. You're beyond fevers and pulses. He jots notes anyway, maybe just to feel useful. You ask him, plainly, do you believe in curses? He pauses, not because it's a silly question, but because it's the wrong one. No, he says, but I believe in consequences. That feels right. They prepared your room again. Brighter this time. More windows. As if light might slow what's already unfolding. You let it warm your face, and for the briefest moment, you feel weightless. Like a paper doll in a sunbeam. A priest comes next. Same prayers. Same soft voice. He asks if you want to confess. You say, I forgive them. He looks confused. You don't clarify. There's no point. This life of courts and coronets was always smoke and mirrors. Centuries of ceremonial nonsense wrapped around very real pain. Your spine still curves the wrong way. Your lungs still struggle with shallow air. But your mind? That's the real tragedy. It works. It remembers. It sees. You recall a ball when you were 9. Your mother whispering, smile bigger. The Spanish are watching. You smiled until your jaw locked. Then you cried in secret for 3 hours and no one noticed. You remember the pigeon that landed on your windowsill when you were 12. You fed it grain for a week. You called it Charles. One day it didn't return. You wept more than when your brother died. You remember the blood in the handkerchief, the trembling physicians, the way your father looked away. You were 16. That was the beginning of the end. You remember. And now, on this side of it all, you wonder what kind of legacy remains. Your name? Probably etched in some marble crypt with dates and titles. His Royal Highness, Duke of X, Prince of Y, Defender of Z. You wish they'd write something more honest. He tried. He noticed things. He loved rain. But truth rarely makes it into epitaphs. Charlotte visits once more. She doesn't speak, just holds your hand. Her palms are warm, alive. You squeeze lightly. You don't say goodbye. Not yet, because the body falters slowly, the mind even slower. And sometimes in moments like this, sunlight on your face, a child nearby, the memory of lavender. You feel almost human again. Almost. You wake before dawn. Or maybe it's that strange twilight between dreams and awareness, when the curtains blur and the air feels too heavy to breathe. You're not quite sure how long you've been in this bed. Days, weeks, a season or two. Time behaves oddly when your body is a waiting room for history. They've trimmed your hair again. Not that it matters. You can't feel much of anything above your ears. But it smells like rose water, and that small luxury is enough to ground you for another breath. You watch the ceiling. The fresco above you is faded now, but still ridiculous. Angels in togas holding trumpets over clouds. One of them is missing a wing. It makes you feel better somehow. Even angels have structural failures. The doctor returns mid-morning, this time with another man. A new specialist. Young, optimistic, wearing gloves too large for his hands. They murmur, as if you're an artifact they can't touch. You wonder if you should tell them that whatever they're looking for has already left the building. Historians still argue whether Charles II of Spain ever truly understood his own condition. The younger doctor says to no one in particular. You blink once, an involuntary tribute. You're not Charles, but you recognize his ghost in every reflective surface. That same Habsburg jaw, the same thick tongue, the same weak legs and overburdened name. You wonder if he ever looked in the mirror and felt more monster than monarch. One of your fingers curls involuntarily. It shocks the nurse. She calls a sign. You know better. It's your body misfiring. A twitch. An echo. Charlotte returns. She brings a cushion embroidered with violets and places it under your arm. You want to tell her you're sorry. Sorry she'll have to navigate all of this when you're gone. Sorry that the blood you shared came with a curse in its marrow. She kisses your forehead. It feels like absolution. Your cousin from Bavaria sends a painted miniature. You think he always liked you in a tragic kind of way. The painting is flattering. No crooked jaw, no thin lips, no hint of the scoliosis that's turning your spine into a question mark. Just a regal gaze that belongs to someone else entirely. You're slipping. Dreams blend with memory now. You see banquet halls where your bones ache with cold. You see parades where your legs gave out, but the trumpets kept playing. You see your mother's eyes as she whispered, "At least you're pure. That matters most. Pure," as in genetically consistent, unblemished, royal. You remember asking once, "Why don't we marry people outside the family?" They told you, "Because a true king must carry the blood." You think now, perhaps that blood carried too much. Scholars debate whether the Habsburgs and Bourbons simply ignored centuries of evidence, or whether they genuinely believe their lineage made them divine. It's possible both are true. Denial is powerful when propped up by gold and cathedrals. You cough, and someone rushes to dab your lips. There's no panic anymore, just protocol. One of the maids lights incense, not for health, but for air quality. You silently applaud her commitment to aesthetic. You drift again, this time to Prague. You're 12. You're watching dancers at the Winter Ball, too weak to join, but mesmerized by how easily they move. One of them notices you staring. He bows. You smile back, painfully, before your tutor wheels you away. Your body was always a prison, polished, decorated, but a prison nonetheless. You remember one doctor calling you a precious relic. He meant it kindly. You were 10. You cried for an hour afterward. Another flash, Versailles. Peacocks in the courtyard. A game of cards you couldn't win because your fingers wouldn't hold them. Your cousin laughed and kissed your hand. You wished you were invisible. Your mind flickers like candlelight. Names fade. Years collapse. But the pain never lies. They've dressed you again. A velvet robe, crisp white sheets. You feel like you're being staged for something final. Maybe you are. One last viewing. One last appearance as the royal son before the curtain drops. Outside, the bells ring. Not for you. For Mass. Inside, the silence returns. Your nurse whispers a prayer. She thinks you can't hear her. You hear every word. You think of the others. The boys who didn't make it past infancy. The sons who limped into adulthood only to cough themselves into graves before 20. The girls who bled too often or not at all. The ones with eyes that didn't align and minds that bent in strange, spiraled ways. You were lucky. Comparatively. At least you made it to reflection. At least you had words. At least you remember rain. Then something shifts internally. A thread loosens. A muscle releases. You feel light. Charlotte is still here. The violet cushion beneath your arm. The scent of lavender in the air. You fix your gaze on the painted angel missing its wing and think, "That's me." And with that thought, your breath finds stillness. The room holds itself. And then, nothing. Let's take a deep breath now. You've wandered through candlelit palaces and crumbling bloodlines, through quiet corridors lined with portraits of boys who never stood a chance, through centuries of ceremonial sadness, cloaked in velvet and embroidered with duty. It's a lot to carry, but you've done it gently, with eyes open, tracing the thread that binds all those royal sons together. The thread of expectation and desperation, and the quiet grief of being born to preserve a name rather than live a life. And now, as you lie still with the story wrapped around you, let that history soften. Let the echoes of harps and distant bells fade into the hush of your room. There's no need to hold on to the weight anymore. Just exhale. The palaces are far away now. The names and titles blur like old ink on damp paper. What remains is quiet, still, peaceful, maybe even merciful. And maybe, just maybe, you'll dream of running, free from velvet chains, barefoot on dewy grass, laughing in a body that finally feels like your own. You made it to the end, friend. Now, let your eyelids drift, let your breath slow, and let sleep carry you somewhere gentle and far. You're safe here. Good night.